Imagine thinking that the WNBA owners are going to give you 4 times your salary, are going to give you $1 million contracts, and then saying, perfect, I'm going to get $1 million contract. And then these owners, they're not going to care if I go play an Unrivaled. They're not going to care if I go play overseas. Newsflash, ladies, yes, they are going to care.
When a legend like Lisa Leslie speaks, the entire basketball world stops to listen. Her recent statement about Caitlin Clark wasn't just commentary. It was a bombshell that shook fans, coaches, and even league executives. Leslie A. Hall, a famer who knows the grind and the pain of elite basketball, warned against the dangerous rush to get Clark back on the court. But this wasn't just about one injury. It was a direct challenge to how the Indiana Fever and perhaps the entire WNBA are handling their brightest young star.
If WNBA owners say, here's $1 million contract, they don't want you to play in Unrivaled. And the fact that Satou Sabally, the fact that Nafisa Collier, the fact that they didn't understand this throughout this entire process and suddenly seem surprised that that's the reality of the situation, who's advising them? Who's in their corner? Who are they talking to?
At a time when Clark's logo launch sold out arenas and record-breaking ratings have put unprecedented pressure on her shoulders, Leslie's words hit harder than any headline. The question now isn't just if Caitlin Clark will return, it's whether the league is willing to gamble her future for short-term glory. And that's where the firestorm begins.
Is it worth it to bring Caitlin Clark back? Should she come back? Should she come back and play for Stephanie White? There's a lot of people bringing that up too. Is a lot of this got to do with play style and not just injury? I've wondered that myself.
Lisa Leslie didn't sugarcoat her words, and that's what made her statement so powerful. Speaking from experience, she compared Caitlin Clark's deep groin injury to the one she herself suffered during her playing days. For most fans, it might sound like just another setback, something you push through and get back on the floor. But Leslie made it clear, this type of injury is nothing to play around with. One sudden cut, one hard pivot, and the damage could linger for years, possibly reshaping Clark's career before it even fully blossoms.
Talking about Caitlin Clark coming back, Stephanie White.
Caitlin able to go through your little walkthrough or whatever you normally do, and what do you want to see ultimately to get comfort whenever the time comes?
Yeah, she went through our walkthrough yesterday. Today it was very short, prior to game time, but she went through it yesterday, and I want to see her in practice, live in practice. Want to see her continue to work to not just build endurance, but to be able to handle contact 94 feet as it's going to be in game, and to be able to do that and sustain from an endurance standpoint. And that's going to take multiple practices to make sure that there's no regression. And as most of us know, when we get fatigued, we look different, and see how she plays through fatigue.
Sorry to follow up on that. Do you have enough practices left for that opportunity, especially this late in the season? They get changed depending on your schedule, things like that.
Not necessarily probably team practices, but being able to put together, threes, fours, and different things that we can go against and match up.
Coming from anyone else, it might have been brushed off as cautious talk. But when it comes from one of the greatest players in WNBA history, people pay attention. Her warning struck at the heart of a growing debate. Should the Indiana Fever risk their young superstar just to sneak into the playoffs as an 8th seed? Leslie's tone suggested a hard no. She stressed that Clark's future wasn't worth gambling for what she called a meaningless short-term push.
And Lisa Leslie gave us her 2 cents on Caitlin Clark coming back from an injury. Lisa Leslie, though not in her 20s, in her 30s, she sustained an injury very similar to this deep groin injury that Caitlin Clark is currently dealing with. And Lisa Leslie said, if it was up to me, if I'm the coach, if I'm the GM, I'm not risking it for the biscuit. An 8th seed? Nah, I'm good. Go up against the Lynx just to have the stud buds put their hands all over her? Nah, I'm good.
The Fever could fight their way into a tough matchup against Minnesota, but at what cost? As Leslie framed the choice in blunt terms, protect Clark's long-term health, or risk losing her brilliance for good. That message didn't just resonate with medical staff and front offices. It rippled through fans and media who've watched the enormous weight Clark has carried since entering the league. The WNBA has never had a figure generate this level of attention so quickly. Ticket sales, TV ratings, merchandise, all of it skyrocketed because of her presence. And yet, Leslie's point reminded everyone that behind the highlight reels and sold-out arenas is a 22-year-old athlete whose body can only take so much. What made Leslie's statement a bombshell wasn't just the medical caution, it was the implication that the Fever and the WNBA might be prioritizing spectacle over sustainability. If Clark comes back too early and injures herself, the league doesn't just lose a star, it risks alienating the very fan base that she helped bring in. Imagine the fallout if Clark limps off the court, not just for a game, but for months or even seasons. Leslie has lived through the grind, and her words carried the weight of someone who knows exactly what that road looks like. This wasn't just an observation, it was a challenge to decision-makers. Was Indiana willing to ignore wisdom for a fleeting playoff berth? Was the league prepared to push its brightest star into danger to keep the momentum rolling? Those questions, sparked by Leslie's candor, set the stage for a storm of opinions across sports media. And, just as fans began to digest her comments, another layer of pressure surfaced: Caitlin Clark's personal brand and the expectations tied to it, because, as Leslie pointed out, this wasn't only about a team or a playoff seed. This was about the future of the WNBA itself. Caitlin Clark's recovery isn't happening in a vacuum. Every day she sits on the sidelines, the weight of expectation grows heavier, not just from her team, but from the entire league. The moment her logo dropped and Nike unveiled her signature line, the stakes shifted. Clark was no longer just a rookie guard trying to find her rhythm in the pros. She became a brand, a global face of women's basketball, and the kind of player executives dream of building dynasties around. That kind of pressure would test even the most seasoned veteran. And Clark is only in her second year. Fans have been relentless with their anticipation. From Iowa to Indiana, thousands of supporters bought tickets with the hope of seeing her play live. TV networks gambled on her star power to drive viewership, and they've been rewarded with record-breaking numbers. But those numbers come at a cost. Clark knows fans aren't just waiting for a comeback, they're waiting for a show. They want the dazzling logo threes, the fearless drives, the swagger that made her appointment viewing in college. Sitting out isn't just a matter of healing. It's a tug-of-war between her health and the entertainment engine she fuels. Leslie's warning put this reality in perspective. She reminded everyone that no amount of jersey sales or viral highlights is worth sacrificing the longevity of Clark's career. Still, the business side of basketball doesn't always align with player welfare. The Indiana Fever desperately want to ride the wave of momentum Clark created. A playoff berth, even as an 8th seed, would be marketed as proof that her arrival is transforming the franchise. And from a league standpoint, having Clark back on the floor is pure gold. Every night she plays, arenas sell out. Every game she misses, the WNBA risks losing casual fans who tuned in just for her. Clark herself has acknowledged the tension. In interviews, she's made it clear she understands what fans want: excitement, entertainment, and wins. But how much pressure can one player bear? Returning too early could spell disaster, yet waiting longer fuels impatience among fans, teammates, and sponsors. She's caught between two fires: the need to heal properly and the responsibility of carrying the league's momentum on her shoulders. The irony is hard to ignore. Clark's natural style, free-flowing, high-scoring, fearless, is what makes her magnetic. Yet in Stephanie White's system, she's often reduced to a facilitator, setting screens and waiting in corners. The fear is that when she does return, instead of the electrifying Clark who once scored 40 in college, fans will see a watered-down version, shackled by scheme and limited by injury. That's the nightmare scenario Leslie alluded to, and it's why her words cut so deep. The pressure behind Clark's return is about more than just basketball. It's about image, economics, and the future of the WNBA. And if this pressure cooker isn't managed carefully, the consequences could reverberate far beyond this season. Because as heavy as things feel now, the next twist in this story is even more explosive. When Leslie dropped her statement, it wasn't delivered as a casual take. It was the kind of candid, experience-driven truth that only a legend can get away with. She didn't sit on the fence. She didn't leave room for spin. She said that if she were in charge, Caitlin Clark wouldn't step foot on the court again this season. For a league desperately leaning on Clark's star power, those words landed like a thunderclap. This wasn't a fan tweeting from the sidelines. It was a Hall of Famer who had lived through the grind, speaking directly to the heart of the issue. Why did Leslie's comments go viral so quickly? Because they hit a nerve that had already been simmering under the surface. Everyone could see the fever sending out smoke screens about Clark's recovery. Everyone noticed the vague timelines, the whispers about sooner rather than later. Leslie cut through the noise with a sharp dose of reality. She reminded the league and its fans that no 8th seed playoff push is worth risking a generational career. It wasn't just sound medical advice. It was a challenge to the WNBA's priorities. Part of what made her words sting was the contrast with the league's marketing machine. Clark's face is everywhere, on sneakers, on billboards, on national broadcasts. She isn't just a player. She's the league's lifeline to mainstream attention. When Leslie said, "I wouldn't risk it for the biscuit," she was essentially calling out the temptation to treat Clark as a product instead of a person. That line became a lightning rod, circulating across social media, replayed on sports, talk shows, dissected on podcasts. It struck because it captured what many fans were already thinking. Are they protecting Caitlin Clark, or are they squeezing every drop of value out of her while they can? The viral reaction also exposed a divide. Some fans applauded Leslie for speaking the uncomfortable truth. Others bristled, arguing that athletes should push through pain, that greatness comes from sacrifice. But Leslie's credibility gave her the edge. She wasn't speaking as an outsider. She had lived through the injuries, the surgeries, the long road back. She knew what it felt like to be told to suit up when her body wasn't ready. That authenticity made her warning impossible to dismiss. Even more unsettling was the implication that the EFRA's coaching staff and front office might already be leaning toward bringing Clark back prematurely. Leslie's words forced the public to ask, do they really have Clark's long-term health in mind? Or are they gambling with her future to chase a fleeting playoff moment? That's why the story didn't fade after a news cycle. It tapped into a bigger, more uncomfortable question about how women's sports handle their stars when the spotlight is brightest. And just when it seemed the dust might settle, the focus shifted again. Because beyond Leslie's warning and Clark's injury timeline, another controversy was brewing. One that involved rival leagues, union leadership, and accusations of conflict of interest. That's where the drama took an even darker turn. While Lisa Leslie's words about Caitlin Clark's injury lit a firestorm, another issue started boiling over: the uncomfortable reality of who's calling the shots behind the scenes. At the center of it all are Nafisa Collier and Breanna Stewart, two of the league's most respected players. Both hold leadership roles in the WNBA Players Association, serving as president and vice president. On paper, that means they're supposed to be the ones fighting for fair contracts, protecting player health, and negotiating with owners. But here's the catch: they're also the co-founders of Unrivaled, a brand new league designed to compete with the WNBA. That overlap has fans and analysts crying foul. How can you negotiate with owners in good faith when you're building a rival league at the same time? It looks less like player advocacy and more like a blatant conflict of interest. And yet, Collier and Stewart have gone on record saying, with straight faces, that there is no conflict. To critics, it feels like an insult to common sense. You can't ask WNBA owners for million-dollar contracts, then turn around and invest in a league that might siphon off their talent pool. Owners see it, fans see it, and now Lisa Leslie's warning about Clark has pulled even more attention onto the tension between loyalty and self-interest. This double standard isn't just theoretical, it's already shaping negotiations. Players want expanded salaries, better facilities, and more support. But the owners are pushing back, demanding that loyalty come with those benefits. Their argument is simple: if we're going to pay you like stars, you can't risk yourself overseas, or in a league that could undermine the very product we're investing in. For many fans, that's a reasonable stance. But for Collier, Stewart, and others, the reality is harsher. Unrivaled, and overseas opportunities have been their financial lifeline. The conflict sharpens when you think about Caitlin Clark. She represents the kind of financial upside that players like Collier and Stewart have been demanding for years. Her presence is the reason owners are even considering million-dollar deals. But if the league bends under that pressure, while its union leaders are building an alternative league, how can anyone believe the system is sustainable? Leslie's caution about Clark's future suddenly feels symbolic of something larger, a league torn between chasing money and protecting its foundation. Fans aren't stupid. They've flooded social media, pointing out the hypocrisy and questioning whether leadership can be trusted. The viral storm surrounding Leslie's words about Clark became the perfect backdrop for the conversation about accountability, who's protecting the league's future, who's looking out for the players, and most importantly, who's willing to admit that you can't serve two masters at once. That's why Leslie's statement hit harder than expected. It wasn't just about Clark's health. It exposed the fractures running through the WNBA itself. And as these divisions become more public, the question of loyalty versus ambition is starting to dominate headlines. But this is only one side of the drama, because when the cameras turned back to Indiana, the pressure cooker surrounding Clark herself grew even hotter. Every fan dreams of seeing Caitlin Clark light up the floor again. But the darker side of that dream is the nightmare Lisa Leslie warned about: the image of Clark being rushed back too soon, only to collapse in pain. It's a fear that isn't just paranoia. It's rooted in the reality of professional sports. One wrong move after a deep groin injury can undo months of recovery in a single instant. The idea of Clark hobbling off the court, clutching her leg, would be devastating not only for the Indiana Fever, but for the entire WNBA. That's why Leslie's words sent shockwaves. She painted a picture of what's at stake if emotion outweighs logic. The Fever situation makes the temptation even more dangerous. As the team fights for relevance, the lure of squeezing into the playoffs is powerful. Imagine the headlines: Caitlin Clark leads Fever to postseason berth. The narrative sells itself, and the league would promote it relentlessly. But, as Leslie emphasized, is an 8th seed battle worth jeopardizing the next decade of Clark's career? The truth is brutal. Probably not. The Fever could make the playoffs without her. But the pressure to rush her return feels like a shortcut to short-term gain at the expense of long-term greatness. Fans feel the tension deeply. Many admit they're torn. On one hand, they bought tickets, jerseys, and merchandise with the hope of seeing Clark play. On the other hand, nobody wants to witness the heartbreak of her being sidelined for an even longer stretch. Social media reflects this tug of war, with some calling for patience and others demanding her immediate return. That split shows just how heavy the spotlight has become. Clark isn't just an athlete anymore, she's a business, a headline, and the future of the league rolled into one. The coaching staff, led by Stephanie White, hasn't helped calm those nerves. Her system often forces Clark into roles that mute her natural style, leaving fans worried that even when she returns, she won't be the fearless scorer they fell in love with. Instead, they fear she be reduced to a cautious, corner-standing shooter, stripped of her freedom. That outcome would feel like a betrayal, not just of Clark, but of everything she represents to women's basketball. Leslie's warning echoed that sentiment. Bringing Clark back too soon doesn't just risk injury. It risks turning her into a shell of the player she could be. And here's the bottom line. If Clark were to re-injure herself while being used as a decoy in the final, minutes of a meaningless game, it wouldn't just frustrate fans, it would enrage them. The backlash against the Fever, the WNBA, and even the league's leadership would be immediate and unforgiving. That's the nightmare scenario Leslie forced everyone to confront. But while fans argue about whether Clark should return, another storm is brewing off the court, fueled by players like Satou Sabally, who are speaking out about money, rival leagues, and the messy business behind the game. While the spotlight has been fixed on Caitlin Clark's injury and Lisa Leslie's warning, Satou Sabally decided to throw gasoline on the fire with her own explosive comments. Speaking candidly, Sabally admitted that she had earned more money playing in Unrivaled, the very league designed to compete with the WNBA, than she had throughout much of her WNBA career. That statement didn't just sting, it sent a shockwave through fans, owners, and even other players. For years, the WNBA has fought to increase salaries, expand benefits, and build legitimacy. And now, here was a star essentially telling the world that the rival league was more financially rewarding. On the surface, Sabally's comment sounded like a personal victory, proof that players could create opportunities outside of the WNBA. But the timing was disastrous. Owners are currently negotiating new contracts and collective bargaining terms, dangling the possibility of million-dollar salaries to keep players loyal. For them, hearing a marquee player say she makes more in a startup league only hardened their stance. Why should they commit massive resources to players who split their time and risk injuries elsewhere? To owners, it confirmed what they had feared all along, that loyalty was being sold to the highest bidder. The fan reaction was just as divided. Some applauded Sabally for exposing the uncomfortable truth that WNBA salaries, despite progress, still pale in comparison to what players can earn overseas or inside leagues. Others blasted her, arguing that she was undermining the very league that gave her a platform. If you love Unrivaled so much, critics argued, stay there. That blunt sentiment echoed across social media, with countless fans questioning whether players like Sabally really had the league's best interests at heart. Sabally's words also highlighted another major issue. Two casual fans, drawn in by Caitlin Clark's star power, statements like hers paint the WNBA as a league on shaky ground. How can the league build momentum if its own stars openly brag about making more money elsewhere? For sponsors, broadcasters, and new fans, that kind of messaging is poison. It reinforces doubts instead of inspiring confidence, even more damaging. Sabally's admission played directly into the hands of owners who feel players are being unrealistic. They're offering bigger contracts, better facilities, and improved living conditions, but they expect commitment in return. If players insist on having everything while also playing elsewhere, negotiations become impossible. And with the threat of a lockout looming, Sabally's words felt like a public misstep that could cost everyone. But her comments weren't just about money. They symbolized a deeper divide between players chasing financial freedom and a league desperate for stability. That tension set the stage for Napheesa Collier's remarks, which only amplified the chaos. Because while Sabally stirred the pot, Collier's frustration with negotiations made it clear this battle between players and owners is just getting started. If Sabally lit the fuse with her blunt admission about making more money in Unrivaled, Napheesa Collier struck the match that set the debate ablaze. Speaking as both a player and the president of the WNBA Players Association, Collier voiced her frustration with how slowly negotiations were moving. In her words, it felt like same old, little progress, little urgency, and no clear signs of compromise from the league. She painted a picture of players being forced to wait while deadlines loomed closer. And for many fans, that sounded like a familiar story. But owners saw things differently. To them, Collier's public complaint ignored the concessions they had. Already placed on the table, reports suggest they've offered expanded salary caps, better travel arrangements, improved facilities, and even increased roster sizes. Those are major steps forward for a league still battling financial hurdles. Yet, from the owner's perspective, players like Collier were still asking for more without giving anything in return. The unspoken deal-breaker. Players continuing to participate in rival leagues like Unrivaled or risk themselves overseas while demanding millionaire-level salaries at home. This clash exposed the core of the problem. Players believe they deserve higher pay and better conditions, especially given the momentum Caitlin Clark has created. They want to capitalize on the historic attention the league is finally receiving. Owners, on the other hand, argue that investing heavily only makes sense if players commit exclusively to the WNBA. Otherwise, it feels like throwing money into a well with no bottom. Collier, as both union president and Unrivaled co-founder, embodies that tension more than anyone else. And her comments, whether intentional or not, put the issue front and center. Fans couldn't ignore the irony. Here was one of the loudest voices, pushing for bigger deals, while simultaneously building an alternative league. It felt like a double standard, and social media didn't hold back in pointing it out. Critics accused Collier of wanting her cake, and eating it too, demanding loyalty from owners while offering none in return. Supporters defended her, arguing that players have every right to pursue financial independence. Either way, her words guaranteed that the fight over player loyalty and league investment wasn't going away. For the WNBA, this was a dangerous development. The more these tensions play out publicly, the shakier the league's image becomes. With Clark sidelined and Leslie warning against rushing her back, the last thing the WNBA needed was its leadership, airing grievances that made negotiations look hopeless. Yet Collier's frustration reflected how high the stakes had become. The future of contracts, facilities, and the league's very survival were on the line. The question hanging over everything was simple. Who will blink first? Will players back off their demands for flexibility, or will owners refuse to budge on their financial lines? With the deadline fast approaching, Collier's comments made one thing clear. The storm isn't passing. In fact, it's building toward something even more explosive, the looming threat of a lost season. As Nafisa Collier's frustrations echoed across headlines, the conversation shifted to something far more dangerous than player-owner. Disagreements, the growing fear that the WNBA could face a lockout that wipes away the 2026 season. For weeks, whispers of this possibility floated in the background, but with every interview, every viral comment, and every failed negotiation, the whispers grew louder. Now, fans, media, and insiders are treating it like a very real threat. The timing could not be worse. Caitlin Clark has given the WNBA a surge of popularity unlike anything in its history. Ticket sales have skyrocketed, viewership is at all-time highs, and even casual sports fans are tuning in to watch her play. The league has momentum it has never enjoyed before, and for the first time, conversations about million-dollar salaries don't sound unrealistic. But that momentum is fragile, and a lockout could shatter it overnight. Imagine the optics. The league finally breaks into the mainstream, only to slam the brakes and disappear for a full season. Fans who just discovered Clark and the Fever might move on, turning their attention back to the NBA, college hoops, or other sports altogether. Owners understand this risk, which is why they've offered concessions. Expanded rosters, better travel, improved facilities, all are attempts to meet the players halfway. But the sticking point remains player loyalty. From the owner's perspective, it makes no sense to invest heavily while their stars chase bags in unrivaled or overseas. From the player's side, those outside opportunities are proof of their value and a safeguard. Against a league that hasn't always provided financial security, both arguments have weight, but if neither side yields, the result could be catastrophic. Fans are watching closely, and their patience is wearing thin. Many feel torn between supporting the players' demands for fairness and fearing what a lockout would mean for the league's survival. Social media has become a battleground of opinions. Some argue that without stronger contracts, players will always look elsewhere, while others insist that sacrificing a season would erase everything Clark has built. The debate is heated, but the underlying fear is the same. The WNBA doesn't have the luxury of starting over if momentum is lost. And that's why Lisa Leslie's bombshell statement about Clark's health feels even more symbolic now. Protecting her isn't just about one player. It's about protecting the league's future. If Clark is rushed back, re-injures herself, or gets caught in the politics of this labor dispute, the fallout could cripple everything. Leslie's words forced everyone to face the truth. The WNBA stands at a crossroads, and the next decisions will define not just Clark's career, but the direction of women's basketball itself. The countdown to 2026 has begun. Every press conference, every negotiation, and every injury update inches the league closer to a tipping point. Will they find compromise and secure the momentum Clark has given them, or will stubbornness send the entire sport into silence? That's the chilling question hanging over the league, and the clock is ticking. Lisa Leslie's bombshell didn't just spark headlines, it ripped open every underlying tension the WNBA has been trying to contain. Her warning about Caitlin Clark's injury forced the league, the Fever, and fans to confront an uncomfortable truth. Short-term glory is meaningless if it sacrifices long-term greatness. At the same time, the drama with Satou Sabally, Nafisa Collier, and the looming negotiations exposed how fragile the league's future really is. The WNBA finally has the attention it's craved for decades, but that spotlight cuts both ways. If Clark is rushed back too soon, or if the lockout threat becomes reality, the league risks losing everything it has just gained. Now, the fate of women's basketball sits at a crossroads: protect its brightest star and secure lasting growth, or gamble it all for quick wins and watch it collapse? The choice will define the next era of the WNBA.